A very good evening to our guest of honor, viewers, and partners. We at Her World feel honored to curate this special talk show featuring an eminent personality on the theme Negotiating Change and Diversity, Focus on Women and Youth in Science. We have with us Professor Ashutosh Sharma, Secretary, Department of Science and Technology, Government of India. He has been heading the department since 2015, where he helped initiate several new programs related to infrastructure and human capacity building, clean energy and cyber physical systems, industry academia cooperation, science and communication, women scientists, and major international collaborations in areas of priority for the nation. He is also the former head of chemical engineering and the founding coordinator of Nanosciences Center and Advanced Imaging Center at the Indian Institute of Technology at Kanpur. He is a recipient of numerous honors and awards, including the inaugural Infosys Prize in Engineering and Computer Science, Bessel Research Award of the Humboldt Foundation, J.C. Bose Fellowship, the Lifetime Achievement Award of the Indian Science Congress, among several others. His other interests are in ancient history, philosophy, poetry, and art. We welcome you, sir. We also have with us the principal of Miranda House, Dr. Bijay Lakshmi Nanda. She is an associate professor of political science, a prolific writer who has authored many works like The Discourse on Rights in India, States and Dilemmas by Routledge, Sex Selective Abortion and the State, Policy, Laws and Institutions in India by Haranan Publications, and several more. She is a recipient of the ICSSR Doctoral Fellowship and the Delhi University Vice Chancellor Teachers Excellence Award in 2017. She is actively associated with a number of government and non-governmental organizations like the 1 Billion Rising, Girls Count, and more. She has been a research advisor to the National Commission for Women and has provided technical assistance on gender issues to UNFPA, United Nations Development Programme, the World Health Organization, and more. We would benefit greatly from her insight. We welcome you, ma'am. The session will be moderated by Ms. Rakhi Bakshi, founder and managing editor of Her World, a leading web portal dedicated to promoting gender equality through the digital domain. She is a veteran media professional who served as media advisor to the Lok Sabha Speaker and also championed the cause of gender rights as director, Women's Feature Service, and show host on Rajya Sabha TV. We have had many eminent personalities with us for our previous talk shows, including diplomats like the German ambassador to India, Sir Walter J. Lindner, bureaucrats like Ms. Ira Singhal, Ms. Rakhi Gupta, Resident Commissioner of Punjab, Ms. Parul Singh, Joint Commissioner Income Tax, Ms. Aarti Singh, Commissioner of Police Amravati, artists like Astha Goswami and Rekha Surya, women entrepreneurs from Jammu and Kashmir and Northeast, doctors like Dr. Meenu Walia and Dr. Shakuntala Kumar, lawyers, activists, and more, speaking about education, literature, justice, digital empowerment, access to healthcare, and other important debates. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn, and you can access our portal from those sites. Collaborating with us in this journey is the Policy Center and Gender Lab of Miranda House, established in 2019 with the objective of creating a platform for budding researchers and to identify gender-specific issues. The aim is to provide a mechanism to deal with gender-specific issues through robust field-based research. I would now request Rakhi ma'am to kindly take over. I hope all of us have a very insightful session.
Hello and very good evening. I'm very thankful to Professor Ashutosh Sharma, Secretary, Department of Science and Technology, Government of India. Of course, a very eminent personality, not because he's at such an important position, but somebody who takes keen interest, has a passion for not only science, but also delves into the areas of art and culture, as we understand. Very thankful to Dr. Bijay Lakshmi Nanda, acting principal of Miranda House, who's always given us guidance. And today we proudly partner with Policy Center and Gender Lab. So thank you so much. Before I really go ahead and talk about our theme, which is about change and diversity in the field of science and focus on youth and women, I would now, first of all, invite Dr. Bija Lakshminanda for her kind words. Of course, I also thank all the faculty members of Miranda House who are joining us and my teammates at Her World and Policy Center in General Lab. But first of all, to you, Dr. Bija Lakshminanda, for some kind words.
Thank you, Rakhi. Thanks a lot for that generous introduction by Anushka also. We welcome you, sir, on behalf of the Policy Center and Gender Lab, Miranda House. This is a unique initiative where we have joined hands with Rakhi Bakshi, with her initiative, Her World. And joining us on this platform are two of our faculty members who have led the Policy Center and Gender Lab. That includes Hena Singh, who's the leading coordinator of the program, and Dr. Namrata Singh, who's also a coordinator as well as the teacher in charge of the Department of Political Science. We are joined here by a number of faculty members from the Policy Center and Gender Lab, mostly from political science, but also from other, disciplines. As you know, sir, and you are definitely aware of us, we are also joined by Dr. Monica Tomar from the physics department. So it is indeed an interdisciplinary learning that we are looking forward to. We are joined by some of by our male faculty members. I was listening to the fact that you said why there are only women. Fortunately or unfortunately, Miranda House is a women's college, but we do have faculty members who have joined us, who are who are here with us. And other than that, so we have been trying our main striving for by a legacy led by our former principal, Dr. Pratibha Jolly, is that we are trying to bring in as much of interdisciplinary research that we can. And the Policy Center and Gender Lab has already initiated research on the pandemic, where we have combined a scientific base of knowledge along with social sciences. So we are looking at gender, not just from the point of view of a binary distinction between men and women, but gender in terms of a larger understanding of how society looks at marginalization and what are the various forms in which intersectionality operates. So that has been our major kind of initiative along with Her World, where we are contributing in terms of our interns working with them, in terms of us leading these interactive talk shows for a long time. Many of our alumni have also joined with us, and that this has become, which started as an idea, but has become one of our best programs till date. And I think Rakhi may bear me out on this, but I think we have had about 17 or 18 talk shows till now. But I must tell you that this particular program where you have come in is the most well attended. We have already 474 participants who have registered, and already in this particular program we have about 229 more will be joining via Facebook Live. So we look forward to an interactive session, but more than that, sir, we would like your guidance on how we can strengthen this partnership with Rakhi Bakshi, and also how the Policy Center and Gender Lab within the college, which includes members from both the sciences and the humanities and the arts, how can we move forward in creating, and your aptly titled talk, Negotiating for Change with Women and Youth in Science. We would like to be a part of that process. So thank you very much, Rakhi. If Namrata or Hena would like to say a few words as welcoming you, that would be really nice. So I hand it over to Rakhi. Again, sir, welcome on behalf of Miranda House and the Policy Center and Gender Lab.
Thank you so much. And I think whenever you speak, it's a true delight for all of us to listen to you. Your passion is truly something that we salute here, Dr. Nanda. Thank you so much. Professor Hena Singh and Professor Namrata are also here. I would request them if any one of them would like to say a few words. They're welcome, either of you.
I am muted. Yeah.
You are not muted.
Yeah, thank you for unmuting me. And so I take this opportunity on behalf of Policy Center and Gender Lab for extending a big warm welcome to Sir and to each one of you to be here. And I also take this opportunity for specially flagging it off that it was, under the tutelage of Dr. Bija Lakshminanda ma'am, who we thought about this policy center, and we have been trying to do a little bit, because we definitely believe that in order to have a good research, there has to have a scientific understanding of the problems. So Policy Center and Gender Lab is just one small baby step, I can say, in this direction. But thanks to our, partnership with Her World, I think we are going in the right direction. And hopefully in future, we see many more, some worthwhile researches coming out of it. We are trying our level best. And thanks to our very active students group also. And looking for much more guidance from you, sir, especially in the field of science and this college being unique where we have a good balance of science and liberal arts. So just looking forward to your direction. Over to you, Rakhi.
Thank you so much. And sir, before curious and excited as I am, and before I really start with questions that I think I'm only representing, as they say, an anchor is a medium, and so am I here today and moderating also the show with you. But first of all, I would give you some time, sir, to also speak up your mind. I mean, the position that you are in, also the passion and the background that you come from, sir. I would like to, we all would like to understand from you as to where we are when we're talking about focus on diversity, then we are talking about more women in science, more youth in science. What is your thoughts, sir? So let me give you some time. I allow you to speak, sir. It's our privilege also that you'll share some thoughts with us. And after that, I'll start asking you questions.
I must warn you that you must stop me after some time, because I have this very bad habit of going into a spin for a couple of hours. And the topic that you have chosen, Rakhi ji, is so compelling. It is so important that, it cannot be covered in 1 hour or 20 minutes or something like that. We would not even skim the surface of what we are talking about here. So first of all, let me congratulate Miranda House and Her World, represented by Dr. Vijayalakshmi Nanda and you, Rakhi ji, for doing a series of talks on this very important topic, so that you get different perspectives in this whole range of issues which are related to change and diversity. These are really two key words. I mean, as you look to the future, and often people think that these two are not directly related to each other. So you may not, on the surface of it, it looks like change and diversity are two different things. But there's a very strong correlation between the two. So let me just, a whole lot of things that we are discussing today, their foundations are built on understanding. They are not built on laws or policies and so on, because the foundation of this pyramid is actually the culture, if you would, and that is understanding. Right, so let's take a little bit of time to understand what is change and diversity. What is the meaning of it? Why are they important? How are they related to each other? So you see that if we don't understand this, then it remains forever a lip service. I mean, it's something that looks good on my CV, okay, and that's never changed anything at all. So it's very important that we take some time off and really each one of us actually think deeply about it. Which is why, in fact, I was thinking, well, why is it only, why is it that majority of our listeners are actually women? It's more important for men actually to participate in this talk. So it's not only Miranda House, but whatever, I don't know, the colleges, Deen Bandhu, so on. See, all of us are in it. So it is, you see, it impacts each one of us, regardless of what gender and age that we are. So what is the relation between change and diversity?
Okay.
You see, the diversity, to negotiate diversity, it requires change in our psychological makeup. It requires change on many different fronts. Now, change is, first it is psychological, then it is in the social domain. Some of it is driven by politics and political aspects, but basically is society-wide, and then it translates into action. So to negotiate diversity, change is the major factor. Rakhi ji, can you listen to me?
Yeah, I can listen to you. I'm listening.
Okay, great. Anytime it's not clear, please let me know. Because, these are lights and...
Little louder, sir. Little louder.
I speak louder. Maybe it's my mic, which is not Um, these are lights and shadows of technology. Very hard to negotiate them. It's
Okay.
easier to negotiate change and diversity than to negotiate technology. But anyway, is it any
Go
better
on.
now? I'm getting closer to the mic. Uh, okay, so change is the fulcrum on which diversity can flourish. Now, of course, diversity is also a catalysis for change. And why is that? Because when you have diversity, it brings different perspectives. It brings different perspectives about what are the problems and issues that we face and what are the possible solutions to those problems. So these different perspectives, you see, if you ask all PhDs one kind of question, their answers are likely to be the same, right? But if you ask the same question to a person living in a small town with a different educational background, with a different socioeconomic background, then you would get a different perspective in what our real issues are and what are the possible solutions. So therefore, diversity becomes a catalysis for change. Should I try to adjust my mic? Do you think it's worthwhile looking into my mic? I don't know how to do that.
No, no, it's fine, sir.
Can you hear me?
So you're
Yeah,
very
yeah.
clear.
Oh, it's
You're
fine.
clear.
Okay, good. Perfectly fine. Wow, who is saying that? You're saying, sir, you are perfectly fine. No, nobody can be perfectly fine. But
Yeah,
as far as I think our audio video goes, maybe it's acceptable. So, okay. Now, so therefore, you see a very strong correlation between the forces of change and diversity, because change is required to negotiate diversity, and diversity, which means different perspectives and different kind of contributions and expectations. That diversity is the catalysis for change in turn. Now, imagine if we had a monolith. I mean, if all of were actually MBAs in marketing, I mean, there's no change possible. I mean, I have nothing against MBAs in marketing, by the way. Okay, I'm just giving as an example. It could all be organic chemist, for example, right? So
Yes.
if all of us were identical, if we were all clones of each other, then there would be no reason for change, right? And so diversity is important also for learning. You see, I typically don't spend too much time talking to the people who are like me,
So,
which means that I would have very little learning in that process. The learning happens by talking to the people who are not like you, right? So everything happens by gradient, water flows, energy flows, material flows. It happens because of gradient, which means the difference between two people. And so if there's a difference between two people, then you get new perspectives, you get the reasons for change, in fact.
I think the way
So you
you
see
said,
how strongly correlated change and diversity. What?
the way you define diversity is beautiful. I mean, this whole learning, the idea of learning from each other, being different, but then taking from each other, imbibing from each other. And that's what I think is the beauty of, I would say, science, which you're explaining such easy words. Beautiful, sir.
So all I was saying is, look, that these are not just concepts. These are not something that looks good. It is of vital importance that we bring both change and diversity into our everyday thinking, which means it has to start with me. Not that I say, look, oh, somebody up there is going to make some laws and stuff. Of course, that all happens. Okay, but that doesn't, it's not, it does not permeate our being. So that's why understanding is very important. You say, why actually is it important? Why should I do it? And so on. Now change is also very important, and it has become much more important than it has ever been before. Now, one of the reasons is because technology has become exponential. Technology is changing much faster than our mind actually changes. So there are some processes, our mind is adapting to new circumstances. It changes linearly with a very small slope. Now there's some scientific jargon, but anyway, but the technology is changing exponentially, which means that the future is coming at us faster and faster than ever before. I mean, there were times when people joined one company, they had one kind of education, they have one skill set, and they retired from there. It's not going to happen,
Okay. So,
right? So whether fortunately or unfortunately, the world in which we are going to live is all about change. And not only that, that change, the processes of change are greatly entangled with that of diversity, because many of these problems that we face for tomorrow are actually global problems. So what that means is no longer enough if I understand my neighborhood. I must negotiate also with other cultures, other nations, other technologies which are not like me, which means I must have a nomenclature that they can understand. It should not all be lost in translation, for example, right? So it requires that we understand this new world. Of course, this was always important. But all I'm saying is, practically speaking, the change has become so important, and that impacts every aspect of our life.
so
So,
I can, sir, if I
yeah,
may, is that change, of course, is important. As you rightly said, you talked about the beauty of diversity and this whole idea of adapting also and accommodating. As we also say, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. So you talked about the whole global aspect, and I think you have set the stage. I think taking the theme ahead, I would say that when diversity, so we are negotiating for change and diversity. At the same time, when you talk about technological being exponential, let me go to the basis, where we start from, which is science, pure science. And when we are talking about science, I'll come to my question, which is, I think, a question which is very naturally coming from me. Is I would take up this whole issue of how youth and more women should make it more inclusive. I'm sure that you know that we are, as a country, as a country's DNA and nature, not only that we are a vibrant democracy, but we want to really take up everyone at a time when we are looking at progress and development, all-round development. And so why not talk about youth and science and women? And when we're talking about youth and women, sir, taking the idea of diversity, how do we really take them along? We are talking about digital dark spaces where we are trying to reach through the digital platform. We are trying to use technology, but how about taking science to everyone, or having science in everyone and taking all kinds of sections to science? So talking
yeah,
about
yes,
youth,
indeed. So this is about the
okay, jump
processes
into
of
it.
democratizing our science. Now, you see, so there are different kind of issues. One is there are certain disciplines of science where the pipeline up to high school is rather satisfactory, which means it may be 40% women, 50% women even. There are certain professions, for example, medical profession, in which there is a very good representation, participation of women. But there are certain areas in science and technology, for example, theoretical sciences, mathematics, physics, and so on, and especially engineering, mechanical, chemical, anything, right? That there's a huge underrepresentation. And that huge underrepresentation is even more so in the top colleges like IITs, NITs, and so on. Now, that has a very significant implication. What that means is that there are certain sectors in which we are not producing leadership of women, which means that we are not producing role models, which means that the next generation again is kind of culturally caught up in the idea that there are certain things that women are not good at, which means analytical thinking, for example. In fact, the other day I read an article which said that there are not so many women chess grandmasters. And you see, again, people have this stereotype that because this is very mathematical, analytical stuff, and so that's why women are not excelling in it, which is totally misleading. Women are not, their number of women grandmasters are smaller simply because the input to the pipeline, the numbers that are taking up chess playing in a serious way in women is also much smaller. And they basically, they don't have a push to succeed because in a sense they have given up even before they started. So culturally or psychologically, they never become competitive. And it's pretty much the same in science or certain branches of science and technology and engineering. This is clearly a misconception that there are certain things that only are for boys, certain things for the girls. there is absolutely no evidence for that kind of thinking.
Absolutely.
So then what is it that we need
Point.
to do? Perhaps you would
You're
want
hitting
to
the
come
point, but let me
to the
just
point
connect it to a smaller question here.
right away.
That-
Right?
That's the
Okay.
point. That's
Yeah,
precisely
please repeat what you said.
social conditioning, the whole family setups, the kind of mindsets that we have, which says that, oh, are women going to really do so well in science? Maybe not. I mean, that's the thinking maybe some of us have. And that's why we see a very low
Yeah,
level.
so it's a catch-22, it's a vicious cycle. You don't do it, you would not succeed. You don't succeed, you say, well, you're not succeeding, and so therefore don't do it. Okay, so I mean, it's not going to be easy. The change is never easy. Okay, but we have to start today.
We have to.
And like what I said, we have to start at every home with every person. Okay, so that's the foundation really. But of course, the government, the society as a whole, we all think about this and then make schemes and programs and stuff like that to help out. But see, all of that help is going to matter. I must repeat, this is not a point which is often acknowledged and appreciated, that the change begins with each one of us. So you see, because people see it may be a different gender, like a man thinking, right? So men ought to think that I am also a you. You see, after all, in my home also there are women, and they face the same problems that women in the other home are going to face. So I mean, isn't that? I mean, it would be very stupid to say that this is somebody else's problem. It is not somebody else's problem, and which is why I started by saying that there ought to be actually more men in a webinar like this, because women already understand what the problems are, and so of course that that's not the issue at all, right? So
Yes,
when
sir.
we are from the beginning, if we are treating our girls in a different way than our boys, if we are putting in less emphasis on their education or less emphasis on certain kind of education, it is all going to result in the imbalance that we see here today. So when I was doing a BTech in one of the IITs in the mid-late 70s, there were, I think, now if I remember, about 6 women in a class of 300 boys, right? Today, they may have gone up marginally. So there are about 10% or 11% girls in IITs, certainly in engineering. So which means this process of change has been very slow. This is not acceptable anymore.
Okay, so we'll
I
have
mean, we
to
lived in times when, okay, slow change was the norm,
Yeah, so
right?
we really
Which
have
means
to
that
see
something,
as a society, when we are trying to transform, there are so many things which are happening as a society. We are trying to progress not only in terms of what we see materially, but also what we see sociologically and what we see psychologically. But at the policy level, sir, also, and there have been programs. I mean, to increase this participation of or create or instill scientific temperament in young people, also in women. I think so many things, so many efforts are already on. And if I may say, for example, the latest one, and I would like to quote this Gati program, Gender Advancements Through Transforming Institutions. Many others at your level, if you talk about the department, task force was also started. So how are we really looking at a multi-pronged way or a strategy to really create that atmosphere so that there is more comfort, there is more stay factor as far as young women or women in general are concerned to be in science?
So let me start with, I mean, I'll give introduction, reeling out some programs from the Department of Science and Technology, and of course, other ministries are doing their bit as well. But I must warn you that all of this has to happen with speed and scale. I have to say that speed and scale is still lacking. Now, having warned you about it, I must say, I tell you the first program. This is what we call Vigyan Jyoti. And this is based on my own personal experience in lives. I saying, look, why are there not more women in the top engineering colleges, which is where we have a great amount of deficit in them, and therefore, lack of leadership. This Vigyan Jyoti basically is a multi-dimensional approach to the problem, as you rightly identified. Now, what are these issues that we need to address to create a level playing field for women? So, obvious thing is, of course, for some parents, it is financial. For some parents, it is to see that their girls go to the nearby college. For others, it is cultural, saying that, look, can women really excel in these pursuits? The fourth aspect is, getting the support from teachers, parents, neighbors, all of that. And the other aspect is having that confidence in the women themselves in high school or even before that. So now this Vigyan Jyoti program actually addresses all of these aspects in a holistic way. What we would do is we are choosing 50,000 top performing girls in high school. And then those of them who are not going to coaching, so-called coaching classes, right? If they want to go somewhere, they already made up their mind to go somewhere, that's all right. But those girls who have the potential, but for whatever reason, they are not, enrolled in any of these efforts, then we would enroll them into these Vigyan Shivir or science camps. And these science camps are not only to train them, but also to provide them the confidence, having frequent interaction with leaders, women leaders in science, in corporate world, in wherever they excel, even, any of the other activities like games, sports, everything, right? So there's a frequent interaction with women who have excelled in any sphere of activity, and is to bring basically to build confidence in them. We had run this, and of course fellowships and stuff, and also making sure that they can get, if they qualify in JEE and stuff like that, then they get to a IIT which is closer home and so on. So no matter what the problem is, it would all be holistically addressed. And last year we ran a pilot, which was a fully residential program in about 10 IITs and other places, where these girls went and they stayed there. They did everything. They even started with yoga meditation in the morning. They visited labs, they heard lectures. You would not believe the transformative power of this experience. They come from small colleges or the schools and places and stuff. They have never really seen the world outside.
So that's the whole point.
So, it was very transformative, not just for girls, but for parents.
You're really putting it all together. That's the kind of experience.
And numbers, they are very important. Once we start with 50,000 in every district, this is going to be, so even 5,000 of those, imagine if they make it to the top colleges, especially in underrepresented areas, that's going to produce the next gen leadership. Of course, that's not the end of it. This is just the beginning of the pipeline. There are many other hurdles that happen if you get into corporate world, you get into academia, you get into teaching, R&D, all of that is there. So it is not one solution for the entire, set of problems which are there. But this is the foundational layer. Okay, this is where the journey begins. It does not end there. There are, you talked about Gati. And of course, Dr. Pratibha Jolly has been a big champion of it. We have been doing it with Miranda House and many other people. So idea is this: look, if we know what our weaknesses are, only then we can address them, right? So right now there's nothing out there. We don't know what are the parameters.
Whatever I can understand, sir, from my little understanding and experiences, when you're talking about some of them really talented, but not really getting into it, what we understand the points are that, first of all, how much family support they get in terms of, what field are they entering, which is science. And science is still considered something which people can't understand. It's complex. So why go into it? Second, whether when they get into careers, what kind of ambient support they get inside there. Also the kind of promotional values that they have. So in terms of grants, in terms of, as you rightly said, fellowship, scholarship, to even getting honored. How much of that is happening? As you rightly said, sir, change is happening, which is slow. So the kind of push we want right now, you understand, the momentum is really needed to also harness that kind of talent, which is very much there. As we know that so many women with this kind of talent are multitasker. They bring on the table so much which can be used as a human resource and capital.
Yeah. And first of all, let me say, you said science is complex, but I find political science more complex.
People find it, yeah,
So there's nothing complex, and I think all minds are the same. But okay, now talk about there was a special scheme that we started for that grants for women scientists, because often there have been concerns that have been voiced by women scientists, saying that when they appear in the same committee, somehow they don't get judged very fairly. Okay, that's fair enough. So anyway, what we want is, we want at least if the fraction of women scientists is, let's say, X in our population, then the number of grants which are going to women scientists, we should also be proportional to that. Okay, assuming that men and women on an average, there is no difference in their performance. So therefore, we started a new scheme wherein women scientists can just exclusively apply there. And we make sure, therefore, that the balance of grants between men and women is not 50-50%, because the number of women scientists applying for grants is much less than 50%. So suppose number of women scientists applying for grants is 20% or 30%, then the number of successful grants should also be 30%.
Sure.
Right? So this is a very simple mathematical logic. So until, of course, we increase the number of women scientists, which is a separate problem and has to be addressed by a separate scheme, that there is a proportional representation of women scientists in successful grants, right? Also, you see all these committees, for example, right? So we made sure that, at least for last 5 years, we have a policy that every committee that judges anything should have at least 25% women scientists representation there. And let's not forget about the youth. You see, so it's also very important that all of these committees, they benefit from the energy and desire for change that comes from the young people. So therefore, there has to be a very good representation in committees of the younger people who are performing very well, and they have the potential to be leaders in the areas. So we have to cultivate this leadership at an early age, not wait until they are like as old as me, or even 50 years or 40 years. At different levels, you have different responsibilities for decision making and for leadership, so that it gets cultivated. So it's just no use saying, no, I don't find any women scientists who are performing at the same level as some men, and so therefore they should not be in the committee. That's not a good logic, right? So because, like I said, it's a catch-22 situation. So therefore, look, the meaning of being young is that they are more into change, and they know more of what is happening in the world, and they have this energy for change, and they have aspirations for the future. Now, those of us who are not so young, we have more experiences. So it is a whole question of balancing energy with experience. So this understanding is very important. See, age is not, it's not just about, oh, you don't have the experience. Yes, sure, they don't have the experience, but they have the energy and the desire for change, which makes up for the experience. So every committee must have that balance. So it must have balance in terms of gender. It must have balance also in terms of ages, equally important, right? If we don't cultivate our leadership now, when would it, it's not going to happen just overnight, right? And don't forget, today India has demographic dividend, which means whole nation is young, so like 65% of population may be below
So how do
35. So if we don't empower them, yeah.
If I
We don't
may ask,
empower them, then we miss a great opportunity.
For demographic dividend, let me also come to young people. You're talking about, of course, and I think this, contribution of women in science, of course, is a subject that we will be talking a lot about. But how to instill scientific temperament in young people, and really so that they can focus on this area.
Very important aspect. You see, often people think that scientific temperament has something to do with science education. No relation whatsoever. Science education or research is what we do as scientists in the lab. Once I come out of it, I could be an entirely different person. Or even in the lab or on a committee, a scientific committee, I may not necessarily retain my scientific temper. So we compartmentalize our lives into science and personal life, right? Scientific temper is bringing uh, the rational thinking in my personal life, right? And the true test of scientific temper is when I have to make a decision which is, hurts my self-interest. Let's put it this way. Even then, I make the right decision. That is the only test of scientific temper. And most people fail, I'm afraid, that test of scientific temper. Committees can fail it. Anybody can fail it. So you see, scientific temper is not so much about science. It is about the temper. Okay, or it is about, again, as a very deep cultural basis. Or even, everybody is selfish. Look, whether you're a scientist or you're a businessman or you're a politician, the self, the amount of self in all of us remains the same. The only issue is that while scientific temper, which means being logical, by being rational, it may help me in my science, but it must also help me outside of it. That is scientific temper. And I don't think we actually convey that very well. In fact, for all my committees, I often tell them half jokingly, I'm serious, they take it half jokingly. I tell them, please read this story of Premchand. It is called Panch Parmeshwar. So it should be a mandatory reading for all those who are in the decision making process. Okay, if you have not read it and you're in a committee, please first read and reflect on it. Okay, and say, look, when I'm in a committee, I'm not a person. Okay, so I must look at the objectives of the committee for what it is being set up. It is to recognize excellence without any favors, so to say, right?
Very true, sir. Very true. Let me take
Even if that person happens to be my nephew or my friend or my guru or my student, right? So it is to do a dispassionate analysis, right? And not self-centered analysis, which is what I call scientific temper. And so not to be limited only to scientists. I mean, no matter political scientists, no matter sociologists, archaeologists, anybody, it is required in the society as a whole for us to do the right thing. Doing the right thing is the basis for everything. See, all the issues that we are discussing here today, the solution is in scientific temper, but it's not is misunderstood and it is rarely put in practice.
So what you have said is a true example of how leadership in science should be taken ahead. And I'm not trying to flatter you here, but I think we really need people like you who put science, and convey it so beautifully and simply before all of us to understand that, as you rightly said, there's nothing like a scientific temper. It's just pure temper. So what we want to see is the true application of science in our everyday life. It's all around us to make it viable and functional. To talk about STEM, this whole idea of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, which has become very relevant these days as a term to be talked about. How would you really take it, see it taking shape and a road ahead, especially in India, when we are really looking at urbanization, modernization, but we also need to look at the middle class, the tier 2 cities, the B cities, how to really take this whole idea ahead.
Yes, so STEM, it becomes really very important. Of course, STEM has been important since the rise of industrialization. Even before that, for health and for proper living and so on, what we call traditional wisdom. But the modern form of STEM, it has been driven in many different ways by the rise of different kind of industries. So industry 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe don't have time to get into it, and what kind of responses it has generated in the society. We often think of some kind of pristine science and technology. There is no such thing. Okay, it's all in response to different needs of industry, of different societies, and so on, that these things are shaped. Now, of course, what are our needs? Of course, as you rightly pointed out, this is, you see, even after COVID-19 is long gone, disappeared from the margins of history books, we are going to have overarching challenges. And these overarching challenges, a very major part of them, the pathways to addressing them goes through STEM, right? STEM together with, like I said, the cultural aspects, the laws, the policies, the political aspects, the societal aspects, if you would. Now, the STEM, so urbanization, certainly a huge issue. But even if you look at global overarching issues, urbanization is one of them, so is sustainable development. Now, because sustainable development is kind of, we think of this as so very long term. We think about climate change, we think about environment, we think about constraints on resources. Somehow, when we think about rise of antimicrobial resistance, just think about it. Just let's say two issues. The rise of antimicrobial resistance, very real, but it happens over, let's say, it's happening over a few decades. But when it becomes very strong, the whole basis of modern medicine will collapse overnight. You cannot have surgeries. You would not recover from anything at all, right? So the whole basis of the health systems that we have put in place is to be able to deal effectively with microbes, okay, antibacterial things, antivirus, and so on. Now think about sustainable development. We so easily accept that it is okay to have 2 to 3 degrees Celsius rise in temperature globally by the end of the century. You know what that means? It means that most of the crops will fail. It means that most of the coastal cities would be underwater. It means that there would be new horrible varieties of viruses and microbes ravishing us every day. Now, just think about, and we are not here only for 1 century. Now, think about what happens in 5 centuries or 5 millennia. The reason we don't worry about these things is because we think, well, as an individual, what is it I can do? Anyways, there's somebody out there is worrying about it. Nobody is worrying about it. Nobody is in control. Okay, so therefore, it is a shared responsibility. You see, the charity begins at home. Now, what does it mean? If you tell people, look, change your lifestyles, they become they become very upset. I just give you, I mean, without, I just be, let me be candid. If you say, look, it's good to have one child policy, if you say certain kind of diets are preferable, if you say, it's not necessary to have 2 cars, you can do carpooling. All of these things, when you say that, people just don't see it. They say, why me? So it's just, everybody says, look, it's great to be a soldier, but not my son, my neighbor's son, right? So this is how it is. But fact is that unless you wake up to these challenges and the desire for change and diversity, we would not effectively, as a human race, would effectively negotiate these challenges. It is nearly impossible, actually, to
Since
do
we're
that.
talking about diversity, and I would like to present a point here.
So they
that
are not
if
talking about something ideal.
in the Western countries, I think this whole idea of gender equity, especially in
And
the
let me just say one more thing that
not
just
be a
came to my
research.
mind. What are the overarching challenges? The rise of intelligent machines. Okay, this is going to impact everything we do. In fact, it's going to impact our definition of our identity as humans. Right? Very soon you're going to start saying, what is the real difference between me and a machine? That day is not very far. So your skills, your education, your jobs, your way of thinking about the world, the systems of governance, the idea of what is personal space, the idea of everything that we have is going to undergo very compelling, disruptive changes. And so we have to be prepared for it. In fact, you cannot stop the march of technology. Okay, it has never been done, no matter what you say, and nobody is in charge, and nobody can do it. So therefore, whole point is, do we understand the lights and shadows of the technology, and do we know how to address them, both as an individual and as a society, right? Society, there's no such thing, because there's just one society. an abstract
Okay.
concept. There's no society, right? It is me, my family, my neighborhood, my city,
So
my
both
everything.
rightly
Right?
said, sir. Rightly said, sir. Both at the individual level and as a society, we have to really look at change and diversity with, as you said, compelling, continuum, so to say. But talking about the Western countries, talking about imbibing some of these ideas of societal framework and inclusivity, the gender equity, especially in science, as we read and understand, is something that is really getting focused on currently. Looking at some of the countries, for example, in UK, there is a special program called SWAN, where they are really trying to create a strong network of women. How we are looking at doing something in India, where we have a focused plan to take everyone along. And I'm not really saying it when we talk about inclusivity, we're talking
Yeah,
about
that's the SWAN thing.
gender
It's
also.
basically Gati.
So
Yeah,
section,
Gati in India. No,
everyone.
Gati, we talked about it. But you see, of course, that this framework is modified for Indian context, and it is called Gati. Now, Gati is that basically we take stock of the parameters that tell us where we are in terms of gender, inclusion, equity, diversity. And then we say where we are on these parameters, and then how do we make progress on it. So unless we know what the parameters are, unless we can quantify them, it's very hard for people to change. They need some algorithm for change. They need some recipe for change. So whole idea in Gati is basically a ranking rating framework for different institutions, whether it's R&D labs, universities, IITs, whatever, even corporate sector, if they want to participate in it, right, to know where we are on these parameters, and then we can track the progress year on year, right? So idea is not for somebody, for you to make somebody look bad, but for them to know where they are and what is it they
Yes,
can
sir.
do in order to make progress. So it is a change that matters in the indicators or parameters, not where you are. Where you are is, it happened in the past. You cannot hold people responsible for it. Only thing you can hold people responsible is for not making progress after
Sure.
knowing what the weaknesses are. So
Sure.
this is your Gati, the rating, ranking framework for gender equity, equality.
Yeah. So what I think we are really looking at future, and I think we have been patient, but I think we are now looking at a time where this journey becomes, let's say, faster, if that's the word that I can use here. Talking about taking that
Yes.
ahead, especially in research areas, if you throw some light on that, sir. Talking about IITs, you come from one of them. Talking about medical research, talking about institutions like AIMS, other IITs and technical institutions, we don't see many women at a fairly senior position. I mean, let's say, for example, IIT, I mean, a director at some of these places, ICMR is there, medical research. We're talking about now coming of a vaccine. We're talking of research in the area of, in the times of COVID-19. How would you really look at the leadership really being focused?
Yeah, indeed. And so that's why I'm saying that the whole, pipeline has to be shored up. So of course now, okay, just to give you an example, I came in here about 6 years ago, not about, just completed about 6 years, and then when I had joined DST, of its 25 institutions, of course, managing scientific institutions is a small part of DST. Unlike CSIR, CSIR is only labs. DST is only about 15% of our business is in terms of managing our scientific institutions. But about of the 25 scientific institutions with DST, there was not a single woman director. Today there are 5.
Okay.
So it has made some progress. Of course, there are not so many women out there. So what I pointed out is that because this pipeline is not steadily supplying, so many women coming up, but that change is happening despite that. And I'm sure that once you have larger number of women in the entire system, many of them will come up naturally.
So we would like to present to you also this whole idea and a platform, Policy Center and Gender Lab by Miranda House is actually aiming at that. is trying to really, when we have a NEP coming up, also new education policy, looking at how to make education for all happen, make science come to everyone, or everyone come to science. How Policy Center and Gender Lab can be of use. You can throw some light on that also. I mean, how young women, women who are faculty, women who are heading institutions can really help.
Yes. So you mentioned NEP. There is also a policy in science, technology, and innovation coming up, which is in the last legs. So the consultations are over. About 15,000 different stakeholders of science, technology, and innovation were consulted. And it is now being put up for public consultations, which would run into many lakhs. So anyhow, in next few months, that policy will also be notified. There is an entire chapter in that policy related to diversity, equity, and inclusion of various kinds. So certainly gender and age are the two most important aspects of diversity by numbers, by sheer numbers. But there's also diversity and inclusion, which is related to people speaking different languages. They are often, discriminated. For example, it's considered that science, technology, all English, right? So therefore, many people actually miss out. Not that they are not equally intelligent, right? Obviously, they are, because it's not the language that determines the level of your intelligence. Similarly, people who are coming from small towns, rural areas, we folks who live in cities, we have a stereotype, and we think these people can't be as intelligent. That's ridiculous. And so everybody has constraints based on their background, but their potential for making impact and contribution cannot be denied. So this is about democratization of science in all its forms, which of course starts with access to opportunities for education and information, and different aspects of it. So as far as, of course, DST is not into education aspect that much. Of course, maybe starting PhD or something. But beyond that, if you're looking at PhD programs, if you're looking at R&D and innovation ecosystem, then we require diversity and inclusion. And this is going to be a strong part of this policy.
I think, that's where I think Policy Center and Gender Lab would be really interested to offer support and help, or some kind of synergy that we can always offer.
Yes. So, of course, like I keep saying, the reason I keep saying culture is a very important aspect of it is because while we talk about concrete policies and steps and schemes, there is a weird failure in all of it. That weird failure comes not because of the intent of the scheme. It comes because of the culture. Now, I'll just give you an example. We all know that Vishaka committees are a must by law everywhere. All people still ignore it. And if there is a complaint, we know that sometimes, it's just because of cultural reasons, people are not that committed to doing justice there, right?
Exactly.
So while we have put in place structures and processes, those structures and processes, what needs to be done sometimes is not done. And even when nothing stops you from doing something, they also then get done. They may unwritten rules. Now, for example, you see often husband and wife are not recruited in the same department together. Now, what law says that you cannot do it, right? It doesn't say that, but the people would find some reason. But the reason is cultural. It has nothing to. I have even seen, in my life, I've seen so many weird examples. I've seen a wife being denied, faculty position when the husband is taken, but the wife was actually superior to the husband. If you just look at the CV, okay, I can say that without hesitation, right? And so these are cultural aspects. For example, interviews. I have heard that people ask personal questions in interviews.
Age or marital status also.
Yeah,
Single.
marital status. Do you have children? Do you plan to have children? Stuff like that, which is nobody's business. I mean, you cannot ask these questions, while they are not illegal, right? But so this is cultural. I mean, why is this asking this? It has no relevance, no? So unless you have professional relevance, Because if you have children, there are, laws related to that. You get maternity leave, whatever it is, right? This is given by the law, right? So when you have all this stuff, nobody is asking you for more than what the law provides. Okay, so just be lawful, and this is not a concern whether you are married or what are you planning to do and stuff like that. So these are all cultural issues. And I think what happens over time when people become more sensitive by talking about it, when people are a little bit shamed about it, when somebody says this very strongly in a committee, then things change. Okay. And that is the meaning of having diversity and perspective. Often, let's say there are more women in a committee, then maybe people would be a little bit more hesitant, no matter what they think. Who cares what they think, right? Let them actually not do it. So therefore, that is part of the change. Uh, you know, so look, finally, we have to understand that people are not made for jobs. The jobs are made for people. You see, the very simple fact we have forgotten somewhere along, the rise of modern technologies and industry and the corporate world and the way society is organized. Somehow we start thinking, look, no, 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 are you right for this job? Okay, because job is more important than people. That's not the case. So once you understand that level playing field in diversity has a different meaning for different sections, right? So it is not like saying, oh, I would judge everybody by their tree climbing abilities, both a monkey and a fish,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which basically means that you are heavily biased for the monkey, right? So we have to focus on strengths, not what we call weaknesses. So this is not only about gender. Okay, my own philosophy of life is you find what is good in people. What is it that they do, right? Don't try to compare and don't say, look, yeah, but you can't do that, right? But who said that's the only thing which is important? So we have defined certain things which we consider important, and therefore we try to fit everybody in that mold.
True.
And so I think by greater sensitization, and that sensitization, like I said, begins with every parent, with every toddler, in fact, at home. So if all of us are not doing it, then we have no right actually to be discussing any of this.
Sure. So the whole idea of dignity, respect, and how we grow up to become individuals who not only adapt but accommodate and also provide space for one and all. That is the message that you're giving here, and that's very kind of you. Also, looking at spreading of awareness, making science, for example, more interesting, something that everybody really feels home at. We have had this experience of watching movies, one or two, rarely these days. Currently we saw some of these movies. For example, on Shakuntala Devi, there was one
Yeah.
movie on Mission Mangal also, which we talked about it. Do you think programs which are very specific, like addressing large number of people in this way, or some other programs would really pave a long way also in promoting the culture of science?
You see, if you want to inspire and excite young people about science, or for that matter, about anything, right? It cannot be done by the straitjacket of education that we have today. There are many things that new education policy has introduced after many decades. So let's take few simple things. And it's also tied in with our theme of multiplicity, diversity. You see, the research today, not just research, but our scientific education and research and applications are moving away from being tool centric and discipline centric to being what you had called interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, out of disciplinary, transdisciplinary. A lot of words I hear, right? Of course, the fact is that our structures are not geared up for any of these. Let me be very frank. We are totally department centric people. Okay, if you don't have, undergraduate education in physics, you can never be hired there in a department of physics. So therefore, but this is a huge challenge, and that is why diversity also of, diversity is what makes for the multidisciplinary work. If I cannot work, I'm a chemical engineer. If I cannot work with a social scientist, then there are a whole lot of problems that I miss out on, right? That I cannot provide a solution to. I cannot provide a solution that would be acceptable to people and would in fact permeate in it. There are so many technologies that cry out there and die because a technologist, a scientist has not thought about the market. They have not thought about how people behave. They have no understanding of actually the corporate world, the government. So therefore, finding solutions to problems cannot be done by a single discipline. And it cannot be done, as we already argued, by set of people who are all alike, right? So they all organic chemists or all chemical engineers or whatever you. So therefore,
Okay.
the yeah, I mean the stuff about being multidisciplinary and all. You see, no, okay. Your question was about exciting people, about inspiring young people, right? And so this requires a very different approach. Today it's about learning. So when people are very young, they are very excited about learning. But then after a while, what happens is they say, "Hey, life and education is only about cracking exams, then getting into a what is called good college, and then getting a job." I used to sometimes counsel people who are getting into IITs, and their parents will come with them, and they'll say, "Doctor Sahib, हमें बताइए किस branch में ज़्यादा scope है." And year after year, parent after parent, they would ask the same question. And what they will do finally? They will look at the results of the last year. They would say, "Oh, this rank, got into this IIT in this branch," and so they would just follow that, right? There is no understanding beyond that at all. This is what we call the herd immunity, right? Okay, I mean, they are just immune to thinking totally. And it was so amusing for me because I sometimes even argued with them. I said, "Look, the whole thing about scope or about number of jobs in a particular area, that is meaningful only for people who make policies, where there are 1 lakh people here, 10 lakh people there. For your child, there is only one job which is needed. Okay, and that one job is there in everything that you do.
Okay. Okay. So
Okay, if you are good at it, right?
some other
So therefore, you must take into account
coming from
the
others.
interest
Uh,
and stamina of your child instead of saying where is more scope. There's a totally because even if there's more scope in something, this guy is not really fired up about it. He is going to be not going to do so great in our, there may be 10 lakh jobs in that area, but what does it mean to him? Nothing. So and this actually is not only about science. This is a distortion which has come in the society wholesale. What is that distortion? That we think all bright people, brightness defined by the marks that we get in high school, they must do STEM, they must do, well, preferably engineering or medicine, and after that do MBA at least, or be civil servants or something like that. So therefore, we have defined
okay.
preferred destinations for the bright people. Now, totally ignoring the fact that history, archaeology, philosophy, sociology, psychology, everything is performing arts, visual arts, all of that is equally important for the growth of society. And so therefore, we have not created opportunities in these areas. Again, a vicious cycle. And therefore, we have not made progress. We have not written good history of ourselves
Okay. So the challenge, as you're rightly saying,
because most of the Indian history is written by people who are not, they've been outsiders, so to say, right? And not a whole lot of bright people, questioning people with scientific temper have not gone into certain kind of areas. Total distortion, right?
so
Now, you
we need to break stereotypes. We need to do away with what we are very cocooned in the traditional mold, and that's what you're saying, shaking ourselves, shaking into the age-old kind of dogmatic mindset is something which is really need of the hour. Before I really go to some other question that I want to take in from others, one question, of course, because we are in the time of pandemic, as to you talk about advancement in medical research, scientific research. How much do we really see, again, women contributing there? We are talking about, for example, the vaccine. We are talking about India also doing so much. The research institutes are at work. How would you really look at
And
it?
also, you are saying the contribution of women scientists in vaccine, or you are saying
So the gender lens to overall situation, and of course, women scientists contributing here.
Yeah. So I think, medical areas and medical research and biosciences research is an area in which there is a much stronger contribution of women scientists in terms of numbers and so on. So I'm certain that there is a lot of contribution in anything related to health sciences, biological sciences, and so on, including vaccines. So that's why we must focus on where the weaknesses are. Okay, so I don't focus too much on saying, look, do we have enough women doctors? There may be a little bit less, but it's not, the disparity is not as huge as in many other areas.
Okay.
Right. And so also, there's also a question in the analysis I ask people. They say, look, that women who do technology, engineering and stuff, even after doing it, they kind of drop out. There is always a leaky pipeline going forward. So just to understand it better, I asked them, why is it that there are not so many dropouts after becoming medical doctors? So what is it special about technology or other areas of science that women are dropping out or not attaining leadership positions? As let's say in biological sciences, look, the struggle in becoming a doctor and beyond are equally hard, maybe even harder than, let's say, doing physics, right? So this is an open question. I mean, I don't have full 100% answer for it. So no matter how you look at it, you say, oh, is it because parents don't want to spend money on their daughter's education? Well, of course, medical, education is more expensive than, let's say, technical education.
Okay. So basically,
Right?
we are
So,
also
but
talking
despite that, it happens.
multiple points here, sir. We're talking about attitudinal change.
That's
We're
it.
talking about
So it is
why.
finally boils down to cultural aspects, you see. So there are certain kind of things that society thinks women are good at. So even within medical profession, you would not find many women who are hardcore surgeons, right? So even there is a segregation. So it is all cultural. Then you say, look, things which we perceive as being tough, right? Which are being perceived as more analytical,
Okay.
are
One
perceived
point
as being more mathematical or technical.
is about the financial support. I mean, when we talk about the overall at the policy level, also, I think the right kind of financial support would also help the funding part and everything, where somebody can say, "Oh, we are not being able to do this because of constraints."
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. And for example, the scheme Vigyan Jyoti, there's actually an end-to-end scheme. So it only starts at high school level, but then you have to make sure that they are going, right places. And in case, those who have financial constraints, then we should address that, right? The whole point is, you see, all this stuff cannot be sorted out simply by saying that I would have greater reservation. I will tell you why. Because when they enter a competitive environment, they have to perform at the same level. Otherwise, there'll be no point just getting somebody there and let them slide, right? So therefore, there has to be a level playing field, the total preparation, which means that you have the same confidence as everybody else in terms of financial needs, in terms of cultural aspects,
Yeah.
in terms of
And
confidence, in terms of full preparation.
addressed and how actually the government can look at balance, something which is, as I say, is a journey again. But I think the faster we tread on that journey and together would be something that would be really interesting. So I want to now open the house for some questions. In fact, Dr. Nanda, if you have any question, you can also come here again.
I think the audience is waiting for a long time to speak to Professor Sharma, but I would say excellent discussion, sir. I think you touched on all the points that we consider as important. Our take homes are going to be to emphasize on the cultural learning and to create an environment where culture and science, how they interact, and what are the ways in order to engage with creating an atmosphere where scientific temper becomes the order of the day. So we take that as our message. Thank you, Rakhi Bakshi, for that excellent moderation also. So we will, from Miranda House, we also have our Department of Physics in good number. So we will all join together and support whatever initiatives there are, and we will come to you, and through Her World and the Policy Center and Gender Lab, we will try to bring about certain partnerships where we can take your message forward. Thank you again, Rakhi. Thanks a lot for this opportunity and for creating this and curating. I think this has been our most successful talk per se, as in terms of numbers, and we are also Facebook Live. So I think there are more numbers who have joined us here. So thank you again. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you so much indeed. Don't hesitate to ask rude questions. Perfectly okay to ask rude questions. I don't know answers to all the questions, so I may sometime deflect it back on the person asking the
Yeah, so please,
question
mention
as to
your
what you
name
think.
and ask your
Absolutely.
question and be brief. Any question coming in? Is there any question for our team that we have looked at?
Yes, ma'am. I think we have a couple of
Questions or
questions in
suggestions
the
also.
chat box.
Suggestions are very important.
Okay, they don't want to comment, they are not visible. I thought Sapna was also asking something. Is Sapna there?
Yes, Sapna, what is the problem? Are you not able to unmute?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. First of all, thank you so much, Professor Sharma. I think it was really one of the most insightful sessions, rightly as pointed out also by Nabha ma'am. So, sir, actually, I may have multiple questions interlinked together, but please pardon, I'll try to be as brief as possible.
No, there's nothing to pardon. Please.
Okay, so sir, rightly you have pointed out that the underrepresentation of women or girls in the field of science, in a developing country such as India, it has a lot to do with the stereotypes prevailing in families. So from what I gather is that it has more to do with the way people have perceived stereotypes, regarding this discipline as becoming more male-centric. And at times, it becomes a matter of great concern, and even go to the extent to render less value over to other disciplines, so to say. So not to forget the ever-going, debate between science versus arts thing. So are we lagging somewhere behind as educators or facilitators? Somewhere, when it comes to spreading more awareness about the essence of the subjects?
I think we are not, as teachers or as parents or neighbors, we are not giving good advice. We are all very insecure people. You see, totally insecure. I'll tell you from my own life experience. Of course, I think one of the reasons I got good at negotiating change and diversity is because my father was an upright government officer who got transferred every year. So I changed 8 schools in 11 years of schooling, which was very good because you make new set of friends. Then 1 year you are, you have English medium, other year you have Hindi medium. Then, it's just different teachers, different worlds, so to say. And that was perfectly good because see, when you are younger, there is a hunger of learning, adjusting, and the acceptance of change. Now, what has happened? I see a whole lot of people. They grew up together, the whole high school. Then they go to the same college. They hang around together. After a while, they have stopped new learning altogether. Okay, so there's one aspect of change and diversity. Now, you said this. What was I saying? Yeah. So we're not giving good advice. So the personal example I wanted to give you, you see, so in good old days when I was doing high school, there were 11 classes, 11th standard, and then you go to 5-year college. So I was like 16 years old, and I had made up my mind to go join philosophy, to do philosophy in college. And my second preference would have been mathematics. Third preference would have been physics or something. Fourth preference, engineering in IIT. Okay, so this was my own preference for doing stuff in life. So now, of course, my parents, teachers, everybody said, this guy must be a little bit crazy, no, because he got admission in IIT. He wants to do philosophy in the local university. Then to convince me, they said, you see, if you do philosophy, you would become a professor. So, well, okay, I did engineering and I became professor. So what's the big deal, right? So life comes full circle. I think it's absolutely necessary that we do, even if we suffer a little bit in life. After all, what is individual suffering? There's nothing. It doesn't. It has very little meaning. Okay, billions of people have lived before us. Billions of people would live after us. I think it's very important that we are totally committed to who we are. The major problem is most people don't know who they are. So
Okay.
therefore, they basically go by herd mentality, which means, hey, you tell me what I should do, right? And so therefore, and this actually comes from the fact that independence of thoughts, the creativity, those urges are not really, encouraged in our education, right? So it is all, bookish learning for the purpose of getting a job or something like that. We can never be leaders by that kind of thought. We'll always be followers. That's absolutely clear. And this has a bearing on the quality of our science. You see, so in being leaders, having, disruptive, risky thoughts, so to say, which are essential for change. We don't want to take risk because it's simply, say, oh, failing is not an option. But we have not given failing as an option. Of course, one should not fail in routine things, but it's perfectly okay to take high degree of risk in things which are meaningful, which are important, and it may mean that we may fail, right?
So,
So
so the
society as a whole cannot be risk averse, and so therefore we, science versus art and stuff like that, and basically to say, oh, women are basically good at art and not science, that is all actually is so wrong that we don't even need to discuss it. I mean, anybody who has thought about it, we don't need to discuss it anymore. This is like total trash. Okay, I think you should just totally dismiss it often, right? There's absolutely no debate about, saying that, oh, women should do one kind of thing and so on.
So
And
I
this is
think
why
we
it's
have
so
a couple of
important that we also train
questions.
our boys to do some housework, right? I mean, they should all be trained in mopping the floors, doing some cooking, and stuff like that. So we as mothers, if we have not done that, then I think it's totally meaningless to talk about the kind of things that we are talking about now.
Yeah. So we
okay,
have another
It
question
so
from
happened
uh, a question coming in here
from my
again. I
personal
think
life, I had taught my wife cooking. Okay, I knew much better cooking than my wife did when we got married.
two words that I've taken from here. One is disruption, that we have to start something new, and the ability to take risk, which is very important. So basically looking for change, as you rightly have emphasized upon, also to shaking ourselves to new ideas and new idioms. Anushka, another question?
ma'am, we have a question
Yeah, I
from
may also
Divya.
quote, I mean, you may remember this, whenever I think about taking risk in life and so on. This was last time I read it. It was quoted by Hemingway, but I think the original quote goes somewhere else. And it says, it's better to have loved and lost than not to have loved at all.
Truly, we would do that. We would
So,
love and
yeah.
dare to love. So Anushka, next
So
question.
on that note, there's another question from Divya Kataria in our chat box, who asks that, like you said, the term scientific temper is highly misinterpreted and also taken for granted, as is the case with ideas like feminism, where people
Uh,
don't really understand it and thereby put into practice, making the social structure change negatively. I think she's asking, how do we deal with this practical problem, and how do we make others
Yeah.
aware of this, and
So
really
basically, sir,
understand?
how to find that perfect word, balance? How to really create balance? I mean, all this talk that we've had is actually looking at that balance finally.
yes,
Whether
yes.
whether
So,
it's
so
whichever
the
social,
balance
whichever
comes
community,
from
nationality we're looking
negotiating
at, how to
diversity.
look at balance.
That's the whole point. The balance only comes by proper understanding and negotiating diversity. So balance is not mixing 50-50 of everything. That's a wrong interpretation of balance. Balance is to address the different nature of problems that come with diversity. Other words, what is the problem with different gender, right? So in our solutions, we must address all of them together without hurting anybody else, right? And so it is not simply mixture of 50%, 50%, and that brings balance. The best analysis of balance, which is also called middle path, is done by none other than Buddha. Also, the best analysis of what is scientific temper is also done by none other than Buddha 2500 years ago. And so he said, believe nobody, no matter who said it, no matter if I said it, unless it squares with your own logic and experience. This is the first statement about scientific method and scientific temper, right? So it does not make followers out of us. You see, in this context, let's also understand the cultural dimensions of doing good science. There is a huge cultural dimension. Now, when we think in Oriental culture, when we think about learning, we say you must sit at the feet of your guru. But in West, when they think about doing, research, they say, I stand on the shoulders of giants. You see, these are two different images and they have a cultural meaning. And the balance of the image, actually, both of them are equally wrong. Okay, to my mind, because this is one extreme representation. Every time that we argue on extremes, you are 100% guaranteed to be wrong. So whether we say feminism, whether we say thisism or thatism or leftist or rightist, any of that, you are guaranteed to be 100% wrong. Okay. And balance is not simply saying I'll mix 50% of left and 50% of right and I will get it right. It's not like that. It means a totally new idea, okay, which has not related to any of this, right? And so every challenge has to be met as if it is a fresh challenge and you're looking for a fresh solution, which is not inspired by some ism which has gone back, which is a solution to some other problem, right? So to understand what the problem is and then bring balance into it, that is the only way. So this is standing on the shoulder of giants and sitting at the feet of your guru perpetually. You understand both of these are in themselves is not a full solution, right? So when you want to learn what has happened before, you have to sit at the feet of master. When you want to create new knowledge and new solutions, you have to stand at the shoulder of giants. So therefore, there's a context for everything. Now, you see, we have a lot of reverence for ideas that have been around. We have also a lot of reverence, hero worship, which to my mind is totally counterproductive. I mean, we may get it from Bollywood, or we say this is a great guy and we follow him and his ideas. While we may have respect for people for what they have done and their contributions, maybe even their age, I have no problem with it. But you cannot simply be a follower who is not critical, right? It has nothing to do with respect and disrespect. We must disentangle
So if I
these
may,
two,
so due to the
right?
paucity of time, I think we'll just take the last two questions.
Yeah, okay, fine.
Yeah. So we have
Sir,
another.
I wanted to ask the question. There's one question from my side. The idea mentioned by you, that is tech in the private space, perhaps this session itself can be considered as an example where we are connected with each other through video conferencing and sitting at our homes. Do you think this blurs the public-private divide, which is in extensive debates, especially amongst feminists?
Yeah. So you see this connectedness between people. So while in some sense we were more connected in the ages before there was certain kind of technologies, we were connected as people say, as people in family, neighbor, but our reach was very limited, right? This was basically 10 people. That was our universe, right? And now even, because now we may be swinging to the other extreme, so some people miss that, isn't it? That physical, personal intimacy, right? So we often complain about it. We say, oh, like my Facebook, I have 15,000 friends, right? So of course the definition of friend has changed. It's not the same thing. Okay. And you see, other point that you must remember, that while the technological world in which we live changes very fast and is going to change much faster, our mind, which is biological, has not changed in 5 millennia. Okay, sometimes people confuse technology progress in the externals, with the progress in our mind or the processes of mind, right? Which is biochemical or what have you, right?
I
So,
think
this is a huge confusion. But anyway, question about your question
I
going forward.
totally agree here, sir. Technological advancement cannot match with what we think is our also mental.
Not only that, what I'm saying is something more fundamental.
He
I'm
answered
saying,
it
look,
very well. To the
5,000
next
years
question.
ago,
Can we take the next question?
people were fighting with
So we have
swords
another
or
question.
their technology. Yeah, whatever technology they had, they were using that for war. Today we use a different technology for war, but war remains common. Okay, so our mind, whether it is fear, whether it is jealousy, whether it is, happiness, love, negative emotions, positive emotions, they are identical today that they were 5,000 years ago. Only our means of expressing those desires, our tools of
Yeah.
technology have
Rightly said,
changed.
sir. So we
Right.
have
So the
another
progress is
question
not in
from
right,
Sakshi
in terms of
Kundu, who asks,
yeah, go ahead.
She-
what vision science has to transform agricultural sector in an innovative manner? And she says that since very few people take up agricultural studies, does the new education policy have any plans for it?
First of all, I don't think I agree that very few people do agricultural sciences. There are dozens of universities and colleges that exclusively focus on agricultural sciences, and so on. So I don't think we have dearth of supply for agricultural scientists. Having said that, agriculture, of course, remains a very, very important aspect.
Mhm.
Food security, for example, for all countries,
Mhm.
especially in India, because a very disproportionate number of people are engaged in agricultural sciences. So for the same output, because our technologies, etc., of doing agriculture are different. Now, they are very fundamentally different because I see most of the farmers, they have a small farm. So the same machinery and techniques and processes that would work in US or Canada or someplace, these huge automated processes, these machineries, and the way of doing it, automatic irrigation and so on, with the sensors and actuators and artificial intelligence and drones and hyperspectral imaging and so on, all of that becomes so much harder in India to do because we are so divided in terms of our landholdings, in terms of our educational background, and the cost of technology. But things are, going forward in many positive directions. I know that many of the, these drip irrigation, the sprinklers, and so on, which are automated, are being increasingly used. Similarly, the use of pesticides and fertilizers, etc. All of that is based on knowledge, is knowledge driven. It's driven actually by two things: knowledge and policies. So both of them actually are changing, and I'm sure that people have more understanding of it today than there ever was before in the past. So this is about agriculture and agricultural sciences. Um,
So we have another question from Sapna Kumari, who asks that where do you think the solution would lie, where family is concerned as a unit, as a structure to bring about transformative and inclusive shifts in educational institutions? And does the new education policy have any blueprint for this?
yes. So certainly the new education policy in terms of, let's say, girls' education in particular has a lot of solutions to offer, both in the higher education and in the school education. So I would encourage everybody to read those parts of NEP which you think are relevant to you. Now, we often actually get so busy with our own day-to-day life that we don't get time or inclination to read a whole lot of things that everybody ought to know. And I would certainly exhort everybody, request everybody to also read up Science, Technology, and Innovation Policy draft is going to be put up for consultations. And it impacts not only people who are doing science. So let me also tell you, because we talked about the fact that social sciences and humanities are equally important. So we also want to integrate, what is called physico-chemical sciences and engineering and medicine and all of that with other, dimensions of knowledge which are relevant. So first, we have divided everything into these compartments. We divided them for two reasons. I think this is very important for us to understand that we created a lot of compartments of knowledge basically for two reasons. One is the effectiveness of undergraduate education, which means it gives an identity and a certificate to a person so he or she can look for a particular kind of job. The second reason that we divided this is something more psychological. So which means that having divided them and getting a degree in a particular area, I start taking it very seriously. Okay, that was not the intent. Of course, different industries may require different kind of skills and domains of knowledge and so on. But look, in solving problems, in having a scientific temper, we must not divide these compartments of knowledge. And so therefore, we need structures and processes that are good for gaining an identity and undergraduate education. I'm not denying it. I'm trying to bring a balance in the discussion. You cannot deny it that we created compartments for a certain reason. Now, when we are dealing with something else, when where that reason is no longer valid, for example, finding solutions to problems, then we must demolish these watertight compartments of knowledge. And this is what is called multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, which
So,
I must say, okay, I'll say one last thing because this is so
and
important.
yeah, we
This
take
is,
it.
you see, the whole
Uh,
thing.
I think innovation, led to, and you would understand much better, incubation centers at institutions like IITs and others, and so many other incubation centers which are coming up. So ideas are given spaces. And I think that's a very welcome change, as you rightly said. And we go back to the theme also where we're saying change, and diversity, especially focusing on youth and women.
Yeah.
I don't think, Anushka, we have more time now, though so many
Yeah, yeah.
questions coming in.
No,
What
no,
we can
it's okay. Look,
questions to you.
look, Rakhi, I am a teacher. I've been a teacher a very long time.
I think we should.
My philosophy of a class is that I would be the last person to leave. Okay, so when everybody got fed up and they said, okay, I had enough for today,
No,
I
not
would
really.
leave.
Not really. I think there's a lot of enthusiasm, and as Dr.
I
Nanda,
totally am okay to stay here
we have
as
almost
long
more
as
than 500 actually joining in, and this only shows that how people are interested. What we thought that we are discussing science and technology here, but look at the kind of participation and look at the kind of enthusiasm people have. It shows in the kind of numbers that we have today. It shows also a lot of these young girls who are part of my team. They are ready with their questions, and it also shows their own curiosity, and which is what is really needed today. And as you rightly said, sir, with your kind of experience where you merge and really wish to create that synergy between science and arts, is something that is really welcome. And I think we'll shortly have another session with you, maybe, where we can actually have a talk by you on these subjects for a lot of young people so that they take home these messages very simply and clearly. So are we ready with the vote of thanks, Anushka?
Yeah,
Dr.
no, you said about innovation, right? That's a very important area because so far, everything we talked about is about invention. Most of our talk has been limited to what we call invention, education, discovery, science, and so on. Right? Innovation is a completely new dimension, and it has different challenges for women
Sure, sir.
than in the invention ecosystem. Right? We must understand that dimension because innovation, startups, everything of that kind becomes also more and more important, right? For problem solving. What is innovation? Now, most people, I'm not even talking about younger people. I'm talking about people of my age going to push 60 within 1 year, right? Even people of my age have no understanding of what innovation means. So they think innovation is some creative process, right? We have this innovation, we have this great idea. No idea, no matter how great, is an innovation. So I would describe in 30 seconds what is innovation so that we all understand and how the processes of innovation are so different, totally out of phase or totally in the opposite direction than the processes of invention. Okay, so let me define invention. Invention is basically creating knowledge or transmitting knowledge. This is also discovery. Okay, there is a difference between invention and discovery, but let's not worry about it. Basically, creating knowledge is what we call invention. And this is what we do in universities, in R&D labs, IITs, all of that. So basically, the input are the resources of money, most of it from the government. And what comes out from there is the knowledge or the people who imbibe that knowledge, right? So that is the product of invention, ecosystem. Innovation is transforming that knowledge, take that knowledge and transform into new resources, okay, or new socio-economic opportunities or economy or money, right? So input is the knowledge and out comes money or new opportunities. That money then goes into invention ecosystem and it produces knowledge. It is these two things working together which bring the balance in the knowledge ecosystem, right? So if you only had invention and no innovation going on, that's a dead end for any society. It will collapse because it's not creating new opportunities.
As you rightly said, sir, but we'll have to really come to the end. And I think, Harshita, you're ready with your vote of thanks. Let Harshita come in.
Yeah, so my vote of thanks first. Thank you so very much.
We have to thank you and your insights. Harshita is there. Can you read out your vote of thanks, Harshita? You need to be unmuted.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Yes, ma'am. So on behalf of Policy Center and Gender Lab in collaboration with Her World, I, Harshita Shrivastava, would like to extend heartfelt gratitude to Professor Ashutosh Sharma for such an illuminating and thought-provoking talk on negotiating change and diversity, focus on women and youth in science. We are grateful for your crucial contribution in broadening the spectrum of science with inclusion of females and young minds in STEM, that is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, with schemes like Vigyan Jyoti. A warm thanks to Dr. Bijaya Lakshmi Nanda, Principal of Miranda House and Chairperson of PCGL, because of her contribution in making science and other academic fields gender inclusive. We are also thankful to Dr. Hena Singh and Dr. Namrata Singh for their leadership by taking Policy Center and Gender Lab to great heights. Many thanks to Ms. Raki Bakshi, founder and editor-in-chief of Her World, for hosting such a brilliant event. Thanks to Vigyan Prarasar organization for making this program successful. We hope to conduct such vibrant sessions again in the future. A heartfelt gratitude to all the teachers and our audience present in this session for energizing it with their presence and participation. Thanks to technical team and the people at the backstage for making such an endeavor successful. Last but not the least, kudos to the team of Her World and Policy Center and Gender Lab Miranda House for their constant support by giving their 100% to all their constructive initiatives. You all can attend Her World talk shows every Saturday at 6 p.m., where we delve into themes related to gender and social issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Harshita. And sir, can't thank you enough for us giving us your valuable time. And we look forward to more insights and more valuable inputs from you, especially when you talk about science being around and science being felt and science being sensed. and not really seeing it from a distance as sometimes we fear so much. So that is science for all, and science for a lot of women and young people and today's India. Thank you so much to PCGL once again, Dr. Vijay